Welcome to the Heal Your Hunger Show, where we get to the heart of why you overeat and how to stop. If you struggle with food and weight like I did, welcome home.
Welcome, everybody, to the Heal Your Hunger Show. So happy to have you here. It is a great day to be alive, and I'm super excited about today's guest. This is going to be a really interesting talk. So listen up. Super fun. We're doing this in the Secret Sauce group. So you might have heard me talk about the Secret Sauce group. It's a group on Facebook that's private, but we're happy to have you join it for free. But I'm doing a lot of my podcast interviews in that group. So you can ask questions, you can comment, and it lives on. So feel free to join us there. You also get additional support. So the secret sauce to end emotional eating. I'm also on Instagram at Tricia Nelson __ at the end of the N and the last N. So Tricia Nelson _, just like that. And I have really fun videos and inspiring quotes and really daily messages that can help you on your road of recovery. So please check me out and follow on Instagram and let other people know, there is a place where people can find peace with food without dieting, without crazy exercise programs, literally from the inside out, healing the blocks that keep us stuck in overeating hell and weight loss, frustration. That's what Heal Your Hunger is all about. And you can start your Heal Your Hunger journey for free by starting with the quiz on my website. My website is healyourhunger.com. Take that quiz, find out if you're an emotional eater or a food addict or somewhere in between. And when you get your personalized score, it's a great place to start. That way you're going to know what to do next. You're going to get steps for how to proceed and really start healing the underlying causes of emotional eating. Okay, on with the show. I'm interviewing a friend and amazing colleague, Dr. David Wiss, who became a registered dietitian in 2013 and founded Nutrition and Recovery, a group practice of RDNs specializing in treating eating and substance use disorders. And he earned his PhD in public health with a minor in health psychology. This guy's been busy since I met him from UCLA. He's a scientific author with over 20 peer-reviewed publications, and he's a nutritional and health consultant, functional medicine practitioner. We love that. Recovery coach and passionate educator. And it was going to be a great conversation about the intersection of nutrition and mental health. And he founded Wise Mind Nutrition. So really excited to see you and connect with you, David. Thanks so much for being here.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I have so much respect for you, and I'm so happy to be here.
Oh, it's a pleasure to have you. Yeah, we were supposed to do this like 2 days after my former husband died, and I'm like, dude, I'm not feeling it.
Mm,
It's like, I can't do it. And you were so great to reschedule, and it's been kind of rocky, but
sure.
coming out of it, for those who are listening, it's grief is its own thing. And so I'm doing some podcasts on it because it is, it's very much, it's part of human life, but it's also, learning how to navigate it as part of being healthy, and learning how to not turn to addictions and addictive habits to cover over strong emotions. So I'm like my own little petri dish of
Mhm.
learning at a whole nother level how to do that. And I'm so grateful to God and to my path that's prepared me for this. And so I know you relate to that in terms
Sure
of,
do.
that's the path, right? How can
Mhm.
we deal with life on life's terms without hiding out in addictive habits? So congratulations, David. I just want to say I'm so proud of you for all that you've done, in your exploration of this topic and in getting the degrees and starting your company and having other RDNs and just doing the work that you're doing in the world to help people to wake up and be healthier, because something I believe strongly in is you don't want to overcome one addiction, by replacing it with yet another. And it's sort of like switching deck chairs on the Titanic. You're still going down, so we want to heal in every way. And so I'm excited to have this conversation with you. And I heard an interview with you recently, and I was like, wow, you have to come on the show because you talk about this interesting. Well, let's start with your story, because we did talk a little bit about that before the show. And for those who are listening, please put questions in the show in a comment section, and we'll cover it. This is an opportunity to be here and get an answer or to explore something with Dr. David here real time. So yeah, but I'd love to hear a little bit about your story and how this became a passion for you.
Sure. In the briefest sense, I am from West Los Angeles. I do come from a mother who was a counterculture spirit. So she had a hippie background, and it really just led me to feeling like a counterculture spirit. And so I just resonated with underground music and rave culture. And I always found myself opting out of the mainstream narratives and just not trusting everything that was offered in the world. And, it led to, underground rave culture in the late 90s. It was a lot of hip hop music, and it was fun and exciting, but I ended up struggling quite a bit with mental health and addiction issues. And I pressed a pretty hard reset around 24 and got into health, and everything changed really quickly. And I had one of those stories where it was like, you could when I think about my life, there's like a really clear point when there's two very separate lives, at least in terms of behaviors and thoughts, etc. So I got into wellness, and I got into eating differently and getting sunlight and drinking water. And it just changed me so profoundly that it was very clear that I had to do this for my career. And it wasn't even really my idea. People were like, dude, you're onto something. You look different. Your skin's amazing. Go do that. And it was the kind of thing that I think a lot of people are looking for when they get into wellness, that within a few months, everything's going to change. Like that actually happened to me. So I was at a time when I was searching for my next steps, and I started with being a trainer, and I had to go back and finish my undergrad. And then I went to community college and went to a master's program to become a dietitian, and got really into off the beaten path topics in nutrition. So I was studying nutrition for heroin addiction, nutrition for alcohol, and I just got into nutrition for mental health really early. And that has led to my clinical work with eating disorders, my research on ultra processed food addiction, and now more recently, trying to figure out how we can help people with depression, anxiety, trauma, PTSD, all using nutrition. And I've been obsessed in the last few years with some tech stuff and building and launching the Wise Mind Nutrition app.
I love it. Good for you. Yeah, grass doesn't grow under your feet, that's for sure. Let's talk about what just piqued my attention is the processed food addiction. Can we talk about that and sort of your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's always smart to start with nomenclature, defining terms. I think that the history of, food addiction, a lot of it comes from 12-step culture. And sometimes people use the term compulsive eating, overeating. Of course, we have the term binge eating.
Emotional eating. That's
eating.
the umbrella term I like, because wherever you are on the whole spectrum, it's emotional.
That's right. Everything
at least in part.
We are emotional beings for sure.
Yep.
I agree. And yeah, so many different phrases have emerged. Food addiction emerged, in the scientific literature almost 20 years ago. It was really looking at the criteria for, at the time it was substance abuse and dependence in the DSM-4, basically just matching up addiction criteria for illicit drugs and alcohol to food. There was a lot of pushback in the eating disorder community and in the research community as a whole, because the term is a little vague. Of course, those of us that do work with people, we know that there are those that report, loss of control eating, emotional eating, binge eating with any food, all foods. But in terms of making progress scientifically in the last few years, those of us that publish on the topic have really decided that we want to call it ultra processed food addiction, to separate food from ultra processed food,
Okay.
which has been defined starting with research in Brazil. There's something called the NOVA classification, which breaks food into 4 categories: minimally processed or unprocessed foods, which are like the corn on the cob; processed culinary ingredients, which are sugars, salts, fats, flavors, and things that are added to food. And then category 3 is processed foods, which a lot of people use that term pretty loosely. So if you think about corn on the cob, minimally processed, you cut it, you wash it, clean it, put it in a solution, jar it, heat it. You have canned corn. That's considered a processed food, which is different from what we're now calling ultra processed foods, which are usually foods that someone could never create in their own home. These are
Okay.
generally made by a series of industrial practices that involve very little, if any, intact, unprocessed foods. So they're usually just combinations of processed culinary ingredients like flours and sugars and salts, and right. So the example would be the Dorito, right? Like the corn all the way to the Dorito. So what we're trying to do with food addiction is say, let's not talk about food. Let's talk about ultra processed food, because the data we have shows that those are the foods that elicit the neurochemical response and the binge eating behaviors. Last thing I'll say about it is that I've been collecting data in my private practice for many years, and I recently just analyzed some of my findings. And one of the important things to consider is that ultra processed foods isn't just cookies, cakes, sodas, etc. It also includes diet foods, low calorie protein bars that are filled with. So a lot of those foods are also considered ultra processed foods, which is why they link to both food addiction, ultra processed food addiction, and to eating disorders.
Yeah. Yeah, I love this. And the moral of the the punchline is eat real food, right?
That's been the punchline forever, but that punchline is even not always well received in certain food recovery communities, because they, interpret it as restriction and orthorexia nervosa. So we're left in this battle of like, should people eat ultra processed foods or should they not? Should they eat it in moderation? Should they be intuitive? Should they cut it out? And obviously, like, there's such a wide range of possibilities for people, but it's so charged because people get stuck into like one belief system and want the
Oh
whole
my
world
God.
to do what they do. And it's like,
Yeah,
crazy.
there's a lot to unpack here. So let me back up 1 second and to the ultra processed conversation. Is it because the more processed certain foods are, the more likely they are to hit our, our system as a glycemic, burden, or they spike our sugar, our sugar levels? Is that what makes them so addictive? Is it mostly the sugar component?
It's a part of it, but no, we've pretty much established that people wouldn't usually like have binge like loss of control eating episodes with pure sugar, right? It's usually in a context of some sort of fats or refined grains, etc.
Yeah.
But it really is the collection of sensory experiences, right? Food that's really soft, right? The textures matter a lot. When food is ultra processed, usually fiber is removed to make it, very easy on the mouth. And I think what you're saying is rapidly absorbed in the bloodstream.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it could be the blood sugar, insulin, dopamine pathway for sure. We've got though also just the palatability of sugar,
Yeah.
the easy digestion, and yeah, when we think about drugs
And less work, right? Like ice cream doesn't take a lot of work to eat.
convenience food, yeah, handheld convenience food, rapid consumption, rapid absorption, the same way like drugs are made addictive. If you think about, drugs that grow in nature, coca leaf is not super addictive, but we can remove the fiber, refine it, make it concentrated. And so it's concentrated food.
Yeah. It's sort of like the quick fix effect.
Yes.
Yeah. Got it.
And
And
tasty. It's tasty. It's
well,
tasty.
I was gonna say the sensory, like,
yeah, it's
like
tasty.
I'll take chips over cocaine. Although, I understand that addiction
Yep.
to in part, so relief, right? We're relief seeking missiles, I like to say. So it's the relief factor of fast food, getting it in fast and getting that relief from our pain and our worry. So,
Mhm.
so there's that. Okay. Thank you for talking about that. And then the food, and are we moving away from food addiction because it's like you have to eat, so it can't be all foods, and we don't typically binge on kale, so then we're going to give a subset of the word food and narrow it down to processed foods. Although, like you said, if you're enough of a food addict, you're gonna, you can go to town on anything. I mean, there was one time I remember distinctly where I binged on dry oats because it's all I had. And
Sure.
I had to have something. And so I made it work,
Yep.
and there was this this coffee, the Swiss International or something coffee. People who grew up in the 80s might know this, but it's like this pin of like this sort of coffee, hot chocolate sort of mixture. And I ate that dry because I just had to have it. It was sugar, and
Yep.
it was and tasty to a degree, but I was an addict. Like I had to have the fix and I made it work. So not everybody goes to that extent. I'm high on, I call it the emotional eating spectrum, which is food
Yep.
addiction. So, but
Yep.
I like the word food addict only because, it does describe the extent to which we take it, the destructive ends to which we, go with it.
And of course, there's people that don't like the term addict and say you need to use person forward language. We have a person with food addiction, and we want to get all technical and say this would be a person with an ultra processed food use disorder, mild, moderate, severe. The semantics are always super important to some people. One thing is worth adding is that the reason we do research is to, like elucidate phenomenon to hopefully be able to create some sort of insight and change, right?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people still think about, ultra processed food addiction as this individual level problem that requires, treatment or, social support, whatever kind of help someone is after. But you can also look at this new construct, ultra processed food addiction, more from a public health standpoint, which
Yes.
is kind of where I'm at. Like I do one-on-one treatment with people, but this term ultra processed food addiction is like creating policy changes that we're going to say, you know what, we need to take a look at the food environment
Yes.
versus just getting lost in this conversation. Is this person, does this person have food addiction? Should they go to 12 steps? Should they go to a treatment center? Should they go to eating disorder? Really looking at it from a whole big picture perspective.
Yeah.
That if we identify ultra processed foods as being addicting, then we could try to target some, interventions at the systems level.
I
So that,
love that.
yeah,
I love that. And I love that you're interested in that. I love that you're taking, you're taking the mantle and working on that. And I think that's so beautiful. And it is so important because we are being poisoned, and there is, I mean, I do something called the Quit Sugar Challenge a couple times a year because it helped me so much to get savvy, and wise to what manufacturers were doing to our foods and all the ways they hide sugar in our foods so we will be addicted, and how important it is to know what the hell is happening out there and what they're intentionally doing to get us addicted.
hmm
It's awful. So can you talk about sort of what you're doing along those lines and how it's going?
yeah. So early in my career, we formed a group called Dietitians for Professional Integrity, and these were like a group of dietitians who saw the injustices in our parent organization and saw how big food corporations were influencing the narratives and the education that we were receiving. I think my credential, the dietitian, is a little controversial because I say we dietitians have a long history of sort of being in the pocket of big food. And
Yes.
going through school, I always saw it and I was very attuned to it. And it didn't seem like a lot of my colleagues picked up on the energy that we were being taught about GMOs from Monsanto. We were being taught about salt from Frito-Lays. We were being taught about high fructose corn syrup from the Corn Refiners Association. Like I don't know if it's my generational trauma or my history of sort of being in the streets, but my antenna like picked up on this stuff really early on. And I was
There's
like, I have
something wrong
questions.
with this picture.
Yeah, there's something wrong here. Someone's on the take, someone's making money, someone's spinning a narrative. And like, maybe it's my rebellious spirit or just the truth seeker in me. But I was always, questioning the sources of information, the hidden financial agendas, and interested in what was going on behind the scenes, the conflicts of interest, the public health, private profit sort of conundrums that were going on. And, I got super into it in the first few years of my career. And Michael Moss wrote his books, Salt, Sugar, Fat. And I remember, just feeling really energized for change. And of course, in my field, nutrition, you see like committees being formed to talk about the dietary guidelines. And you see people like that have PhDs spending their whole life doing research to try to like improve school lunches and to do all this stuff. And you just consistently see it being squashed, like the efforts are just not panning out. There's some financial, political agendas behind the scenes. Whenever there's really strong efforts to make change that are going to affect the pockets of, major corporations, there's like legal fees. And so I did run into an era a few years ago where I was just exhausted by it. And I was like, listen, like, I just want to go to the grocery store and buy food and have dinner. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and it did get like a little bit much, after a few years. And I was, doing a lot of eating disorder focused work, which in my world is a little bit more inclusive and helping people not freak out so much about those things.
Yeah.
So my career has been a really interesting balance between like knowing the truth about ultra processed food addiction, knowing the truth about big food companies, but also helping people that have like chronic dieting, that are just not making peace with their body, not making peace with food. So
Yeah.
I've sort of been the guy that's at the intersection of these different spaces, that's able to morph in between these multiple perspectives. And it's been super like confusing for people, because it's true. I embrace lots of ideologies. I don't have a single food philosophy. It's like I do research on ultra processed food addiction, but I also will occasionally eat cake with one of my clients. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Well, hats off to you.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I don't think rigidity really serves anybody in the long run, so I love that comment. Can you talk about what that chasm is for those who aren't in the industry, so to speak, and don't understand we live in Los Angeles where there's like, treatment centers are a dime a dozen here, although they don't charge a dime. Like they charge a lot more. But there's a lot of treatment centers and there's a strong 12-step community of all different kinds of programs. And I certainly have personally seen some of the problems only because people come to me with a history of eating disorder and an eating disorder, or various versions of an eating disorder, right? I like to call it disordered eating in general, because we can switch from one to another, but
Sure.
it's the same root cause. But can you talk about that chasm, because you're front line to it?
Yeah, there's a very clear split, and the same way you described in your groups and in your practice, you get people that went to mainstream eating disorder treatment and they were like given, chips and Pop-Tarts and that sort of thing. And they were like, this was terrible. I'm never going back there again.
Yeah.
And, myself, I hear that quite a bit, and so
it's like, how can you heal in this environment? I'm totally addicted to these foods, and they're telling me to eat them, but I can't eat them. And they're telling me to moderate, and that doesn't work for me.
Sure. So it naturally builds like a little bit of a bias for someone like you or me, because you see like the negatives of mainstream eating disorder treatment. And at the same time, and I've worked in some of these places, right? Like I have dietitians on my team, I consult. So like I get to see the thought processes on both sides of the coin. At the same time, they get people that present to their eating disorder treatment that have like really clear restrictive tendencies, underweight, calorie counting, and they go to a food addiction program or a 12-step program, and they're sort of telling them weigh and measure your food
Yep.
and call it into a sponsor, and they
Yep.
love it, and they
Yeah,
got
and
worse there.
yeah, and one string being too many, and you're done for.
You're done for. You start your day count over. You might as well
Yep.
purge and come back tomorrow, you know,
Right.
like that sort of thing. So the eating disorder treatment world sees the harms caused by the like food addiction space.
Yep.
The food addiction space sees the harm caused by the eating disorder world, and no one's really talking. And it
Yeah.
just builds this like natural polarization that's very
Yep.
common in our world. And people get this sense of, you sort of have these two options. It's kind of like the political, scene. It's like, well,
Right.
it's like, which one do you want to pick? Because there's these two roads where you can learn to cut these things out and, remove them. And there's others where you can make peace with them and be a little bit more inclusive, but I do believe that, someone like myself and a couple others that kind of bounce between the spaces, like we start to see way more similaries than
Yeah.
differences. When
Yeah,
you think
we're
about it.
really all on the same team. We're looking, I always tell my clients, because they're like, can I have this? Can I have that? I'm like, you can have any goddamn thing you want to have. Like, I'm not here to tell you what you can have, because I'm like, who am I? Right? Like, we all have our own individual bodies.
That's right.
But I do say the goal is peace.
That's right. And it's going to look different from person to person, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, a lot of the therapeutic techniques, the trauma work, right? The social
Yeah.
support, the emotional components, the hunger,
Yeah.
fullness, like all of it's very, very similar. It's just that the food plans might differ a little bit.
Yeah.
And it shouldn't differ like on a sense of, oh, cookies and cakes at every meal versus like just broccoli and rice and chicken, right? Like
Right.
it doesn't have to be this, huge, split. I think that there's room for nuance for people to think about like the continuum of like, lower exposure, mild exposure, medium exposure, and having it change over time. And that's sort of the work that I've done. But if I were to summarize, some major differences between the eating disorder space, the mainstream eating disorder space, and the food addiction space, I would say that the eating disorder world tends to ignore the neurobiology of the food, the neurobiological processes of the food, and have this sort of main assumption that it is more about the thinking, the internalized weight stigma, the psychological factors, right? And that the food itself is somewhat inert and more of just like calories and macronutrients, and that it doesn't have a profound influence. Whereas in the food addiction space, there's like almost like a hyper emphasis on the neurobiology of the food, as if like if the sugar was the fifth ingredient, but not the fourth ingredient, like it makes a huge difference, right? There's almost like a reductionistic way of looking at it from a purely biomedical standpoint, like the brain disease, right? And some people even talk about, abnormal physical reactions, cravings, cascades. And so that's one really obvious split to me, is like, how much emphasis do you put on the neurobiology of reward in the context of eating? And then another one, and this is more coming back to how I started talking today, is like the kind of spirits that people have and what's going to resonate, is that the eating disorder message with food is kind of teaching people how to opt into the system under this assumption, like, we have this system, we have this world, and you're better off learning how to live in it and just make peace with the food environment. Whereas the ultra processed food addiction camp is more saying like, no, I don't trust the world. I don't believe that it's safe. I don't want to fit into it. I think that there's something wrong with it, and I need to find a way to navigate it on my own, right? Because it's not set up for success. And I think there's differences between if people have like unhealed trauma, right? Like the sense of safety in the world. Some people just want to feel safe. You want to opt in, you want to play the game, you want to watch the news, you want to do what everyone else does. And there's other people that are more fringy. They're like, I don't want to play the game of society. I need to find my way because I don't feel safe, right?
Yeah.
And so that's another really important discernment. And, there's more.
Yeah, there's so much more, but it's interesting. And I mean, I just will say for my personal, there are so many levels to it. Like you have to know yourself. And to me, that's where the real safety lies. Obviously, in a higher power, I'm a big believer, and I'm sure you are too. And having that relationship with a higher power that can guide us and give
Mhm.
us that intuition and instinct that'll keep us
Mhm.
safe. But it's also knowing ourselves and clearing away, those underlying causes and emotions that can, talk to us in an unhealthy voice telling us it's all fine, or go ahead, it doesn't matter if you eat this or that. And so knowing ourselves and that journey of learning about ourselves and knowing what works and what doesn't work is so much more dependable, right? Because then we are all different and nobody can tell you what will work for you, or there are no hard and fast lines, especially when it comes to food. I mean, alcohol, sure, you put the plug in the jug, it's very clear cut, but it can never be that clear cut with food ever,
Mhm.
because we have to eat. So to me, the common denominator is us, our bodies, our emotions, our knowledge of ourselves and our triggers and what works, what feels peaceful, what feels chaotic. Like that's the journey that will make us safest, again, with that spiritual connection as well. So that's what's worked for me for
Yep.
sure. And that's where I live with Heal Your Hunger and teach, my clients.
And I think it could change over time. Someone could have a much more fluid spirit and then
Yep.
decide later on in life they want to like build a little bit more structure.
Yep.
And the opposite is true. Some people could just be cognitively rigid and feel unsafe and need things to look a certain way. And at other periods in life, be more healed or more open to things
Yeah.
being a little bit less defined. And so
Yeah.
I always encourage people to find a message that resonates, but never get attached to any one thing. You
I
have
love
to be
that.
open to the growth and evolution that is inevitable in the human experience.
I love that, David. Amen to that. Amen to that. It's a day at a time, and it's an exploration, and it's a journey.
That's
Like
right.
it's a journey for
Mhm.
sure. So that is so beautiful. Well, thank you for having this conversation. It's really cool. Tell us about the new app.
Yep. So the term wise mind comes from dialectical behavioral therapy, or at least it was popularized. Dialectics describes this sort of art of investigating opposing truths, right? This idea of that we can hold two things true at the same time. It's a way to think in the both and rather than the either or. So the wise mind brings together the logical mind and the emotional mind. And I really like that concept because it's a lot of the work that I've done with addictions and eating disorders is really like bringing it all together and having this ability to be open-minded, open-hearted. And so the nutrition framework is just that. It's not me trying to teach people how to be like me or to nudge them down a particular road. It is me educating people about open-mindedness, open-heartedness, how to ask questions, how to dig deep. And of course, I am a dietitian and a mental health scientist, so I'm an educator, and I use the app as an opportunity to provide education, but not have it be an education that is designed to pigeonhole people. It's designed to help people become independent thinkers. So that's the basis of it. And then I built nutrition programs for mental health, including depression, anxiety, ADHD, PTSD. Of course, my addictions, my eating disorders is part of the core, message. But I saw a gap in nutrition education for mental health conditions. And just to give you like a very brief summary, we know that ultra processed foods are harmful to mental health, but we also know that there are like everyone has to fit it into the context of their lives. People that have
Yeah.
socioeconomic disadvantage, people that have eating disorders, right? So it's a framework that's built on the concept of intersectional areas, right? And that is the wise mind. So there's really three components. There's a food log, which is not math centric. So it's not like MyFitnessPal. It's more like a recovery app. So it's not calories or macros. It's more qualitative nutrition.
Okay.
So photos, food groups, hunger scores, fullness scores, journaling. There's a nightly review in there. So someone could come in and set their own intentions. Someone might want to work on eating more colors or drinking more water, whatever lifestyle, medicine, or wellness behavior someone wants to work on. The app sort of holds you accountable to it. At the end of the day, you can look back at your food logs, your food group distribution. You could see if anything was flagged, too hungry, too full. You can look at your intentions, and then you just do a constructive nightly review. What did I do well? What could I, do better? What corrective measures can I take? Corrective measures populates into the next day. So you get little nudges of things that you're working on. So that's one piece. The other piece is the connect feature, which allows someone to share their information with a coach, friend, provider, etc. So I have a busy practice and I have 25, 30 people in my app that I'm actively following. So I could see their food logs, their nightly reviews. I could see their digital workbook from the programs. I could see their mental health scores. And it's basically, a chance to provide ongoing support, but it's not just for practitioners. I think coaches or friends or family members, people can follow each other. People that are in 12-step can follow each other and provide support. I actually log some meals in there and have a lot of my clients follow me so they can just get some inspiration on how balanced eating should look and what colorful plates might look like. And people tend to really like that. There's chat features in the app, so that's super cool. And then the main feature is the personalized programming based on mental health. So once someone comes in, tons of free stuff in there. You can watch videos. There's cooking lessons, meditation. Someone could decide, I really want to dive deep and work the full program. It gives personalized messaging based on, the depression, anxiety, etc. And it's really geared to help people improve their mental health using nutrition. So yeah, friendly messaging at the end of the app, at the end of the cycle, I should say, you can fill out the screeners again and see how the mental health scores may have changed over time. And I think that's the cool sell. The people that have finished the program see their depression scores went down, PTSD scores went down, and they feel so excited about it. They just want to go through all the modules again, And so,
Sweet.
yeah.
I would love to put a link in the show notes for that. That sounds amazing. Thank you for that. Congratulations. I'm sure that took a really heavy lift to put together.
It was probably harder than my PhD. I'm going to say. Yeah, it was harder than my PhD dissertation. I'm going to say
Wow.
that. Yeah.
Wow. Well, congratulations and thank you for the service to those those of us wanting to improve our health.
Yeah, and it's no cost, low cost stuff, right? We're talking about an app, right? There's free stuff in there. Go play around with it. If you love it, spread the word, by all means, work the program and
amazing. If they want to just go there, how do they get there?
It's called Wise Mind Nutrition, and it's 3 words. It's in the Apple App Store and the Google Play Store, so it's on all platforms. Of course, the website is
being WISE.
Yes, and I know I'm confusing people with it. And maybe that's why people pronounce my last name wrong. But yeah, my last name is Wiss. The app is Wise Mind Nutrition. WiseMindNutrition.com is the website. There's over 80 blogs on there. The intersection of nutrition and mental health, a place to download recipes, the app, etc. And then, of course, social media, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, Wise Mind Nutrition. And my personal Instagram is Dr. David Wiss.
Way to go, man. You're doing it. I love it. My last question for you, which I ask all my guests, is this being the Heal Your Hunger show. What is your deepest hunger right now, David?
Wow. Thank you for that. Well, I have a 20-month-old daughter.
Aww.
I have another one on the way.
Wow.
Yeah. So June, God willing, we'll have an expanded family, 2 daughters, and I'm really falling into my fatherhood and my parenting. And I would really like to have the kind of life where I can, take trips and expose my daughters to fun things around the world. I'm not like a huge travel person. I actually kind of avoid it, if I'm honest. But now that I have a family, I went snowboarding the other day and I went there and I was like, this is great, but like, I want my daughter to be in the snow. Like, I
Right.
don't even want to go for me. I want to take Davina to the snow. And so it's like, I've been thinking like, how do I get my daughter to the snow? And these are just not thoughts that I'm wired for. I'm normally like, oh, what am I going to get? What am I going to do? And now I'm like, I'm planning a trip to get my 20-month-old daughter into the snow, so that's
Oh,
where my hungers are and my heart's at right now.
I love it. So beautiful. Well, congratulations on your growing family. That is just awesome. I know you're a great dad.
Mm.
So really sweet.
And then
Yeah.
professionally, I'm trying to teach the eating disorder world about ultra processed food addiction. And I'm
Hmm.
trying to teach the food addiction world about eating disorders and to heal the divide, to bridge the gap, to have it so that people don't feel like you have to pick. You can have integrated treatment.
Yes, I love that. And at the end of the day, we're all on the same team seeking peace, peace with ourselves, peace with
Mhm.
food,
Mhm.
and peace with each other.
That's
So
it.
bless you for coming on the show. It's really great to have you.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much. Thanks for everybody for tuning in. We'll see you on the next show.
Welcome to the Heal Your Hunger Show, where we get to the heart of why you overeat and how to stop. If you struggle with food and weight like I did, welcome home.